first police officers to begin the search for Noah were in court today.
Yeah, his disappearance was categorised as medium risk at first, but then upgraded to high risk within a few hours.
I was in court today.
This is a special series by the State of Us podcast. Welcome to the Noah Donohoe Inquest. Hello, Tara Mills.
Hello, Declan Harvey.
We had the first police witness to give evidence in the stand today before the jury. What happened?
Well, Constable David Murphy, as he was at the time, he's now Sergeant David Murphy, was working from Lisburn Road Police Station. He was part of the response teams, and when he came on shift on the Sunday evening on the 21st of June 2020, he was tasked with the disappearance of Noah Donohoe. At that point, obviously it was a few hours into his shift because they didn't know about it until about 10 o'clock after the 999 call from Fiona Donohoe. But he then called Fiona Donohoe not long after that to get some information from her, and then he and a colleague drove to Fiona Donohoe's flat in South Belfast, and they established a lot of the same details that had already been established on the call: where he was going, what he was wearing, what sort of mental state he was in, had there been any reason for his disappearance. Really interesting thing at the very beginning, he was asked about how often they dealt with missing persons calls and how unusual this would be, and he said it's an almost daily occurrence, and they would have missing people aged from 10 to 85. So it just sort of gives you a context of how often the police deal with missing persons. And a couple of other things that David Murphy told the jury was that he had established through the police system that Noah had never come into contact with the police before. He had never been reported missing before. He didn't have any access to cash or any vehicle apart from his bicycle. And the officer said Noah's mum had told him that he wouldn't have been in contact or had seen any other family member, and he had a small group of close friends, Jay and Charlie, who we've already heard from, and this call was assessed as medium risk, but that changed a few hours later.
And then presumably in those hours we are seeing the search for Noah get underway.
Yeah, and there was sort of questioning to and fro about this, about just how many police resources were put into the search for Noah that evening. And David Murphy was able to say that there was a police search by air that was carried out over the parks across the city, from Lady Dixon in South Belfast to Cave Hill in the north, to Ormeau Park, Musgrave, Mary Peters Track, places like that. He said that 5 out of the 6 call signs, so 5 out of the 6 police vehicles that would have each had 2 officers, were tasked to searching. He was asked whether he had got involved in the searches. He said that he had physically searched part of Cave Hill during the night, and he said he couldn't speak for his colleagues, but that was the intended response, that people would drive to particular areas and go and physically search.
And for those who aren't familiar with Belfast, those locations you've just named out, they're dotted all over the city. They went far and wide. Cave Hill is not near Musgrave, Ormeau Park. These are some cases large parks, but that's a sweep of the city, I suppose, aided by air, but they were on the ground as well, according to this evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And during questions from Brenda Campbell Casey, who we know is Fiona Donohoe's barrister, she asked David Murphy if the first 24 or 48 hours of a missing person investigation is critical. It's a phrase we hear often. But what she said was that time equals survivability, and David Murphy agreed with her. Then there were detailed questions about record keeping and use of all the police systems in a missing persons investigation. He was asked about whether he had had adequate training, whether he had followed the guidelines that were shown to the jury from the police's own records. And David Murphy said that he was content and satisfied that everything had been carried out effectively and in line with police guidance. David Murphy had written details in his police notebook, about 6 lines of text, and they were shown to the jury, and Brent Campbell Casey questioned whether or not that was adequate. And David Murphy said he was using a police system called OEL, and that stands for Occurrence Inquiry Log, and this came up time and time again in the evidence today. And he said that instead of using your notebook, most officers would put information into the computerised system OEL because it's a place that information could be shared. And he said it would not have been ideal if he had spent the interview with Fiona Donohoe with his head in the notebook. But there were there were use of words that he had used. He had used the word strange, said that Fiona Donohoe had said Noah, his behaviour was strange, and he was questioned about that. He said, I stand by that. That's the word, I'd put it in inverted commas, that's the word that was used.
Brenda Campbell.
But Brenda Campbell was questioning suggesting that Fiona Donohoe hadn't used that. And then Brent Campbell also questioned David Murphy about how much he had updated Fiona Donohoe in the night. He was on shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And he said the only update he had for Fiona Donohoe in the night was that there was a CCTV sighting of Noah at the junction of Ormeau Avenue and Cromwell Street earlier in the day.
Can I circle you back? Did we learn more today about the risk assessment? You said it went from medium and then eventually went to high.
Yes, because I think in the earlier questions from Brenda Campbell, there was a suggestion that maybe medium risk wasn't high enough, that this was a child who was missing. Then later in David Murphy's evidence, Donal Lunny, KC for the PSNI, asked really detailed questions about this. And Mr Lunny pointed out that medium still meant a risk to life. And David Murphy explained that he was the officer who briefed more senior officers about changing that risk from medium to high. And they only did that once they'd established that some of the other PSNI officers had gone out to speak to Noah's friend Charlie's father about Cave Hill, because that seemed to be critical to whether they were going to assess it as medium or high. But once they'd established that actually Noah hadn't met Charlie, the arrangements had been cancelled, and that Charlie hadn't seen Noah that day at all, then I think that's what prompted David Murphy to go to his senior officers and say this needs to be changed. And it was changed in the early hours of the morning to high risk.
That's interesting, the distinction then when it goes from one category to the other.
Yeah, and just to refer back to my notes here, and this was what Donal Lunny was pointing out in his examination of David Murphy. He said that Noah's disappearance initially was medium risk, and then that was changed to high risk. And that is about material danger to their life or safety. And that is still medium risk. Medium risk still means there's a material danger to their life or safety. And it's not something that should be minimised. It shouldn't be read into that medium means that it should be, you shouldn't be worried about it. The guidelines quite clearly say it's a significant risk, and that's the starting point. But some of the things Donal Lunny said were taken into consideration was the time of year. So perhaps if it had been winter, it might have gone automatically to high risk, but it was June. Longer evenings, warmer weather. And also that Noah was a child, but he was 14 and 7 months, not 4. There was an absence of any medical condition. He didn't need medication urgently. So these are some of the factors that Donal Lunny, through David Murphy, was trying to point out why the police would have assessed medium risk and not high risk. And I think the other interesting thing to add to this point that Donal Lunny pointed out was high risk meant a Facebook post. And the Facebook post went up in the middle of the night at around 1 a.m.
Sorry, what do you mean?
So it meant that they had to go to Fiona Donohoe and gain consent for a Facebook post to be put out across all 5 policing districts that would go up across Facebook with a photograph of Noah Donohoe and say he was a missing person.
So it's a public appeal happens on high risk.
And Donal Lunny said that many of the witnesses we've already heard from had seen that Facebook post and that police appeal, and that's what had prompted them to come and contact.
We've heard of that through several witnesses on Northwood Road, haven't we? Right. And there was another police witness as well today, Constable David Budden.
Yes, and Constable Budden was only 6 months out of Garnerville. He was a newly qualified police officer, and he took over on the shift after David Murphy.
Oh, at 7 a.m.
So David Murphy finished at 7 a.m. and David Budden took over at 7 a.m. and he was on a 12-hour shift. And he had also gone to Fiona Donohoe's flat while he was trying to find out further information. And like David Murphy, he had carried out a search of the flat, but they called it a tidy search. So they're not tipping out everything and trying to find really detailed information, just a kind of quick look around. Were there any notes left? What state was the house in? Things like that. So David Budden, in his statement, said the bedroom, Noah Donohoe's bedroom, was very tidy. He said he had established through Noah's mum there was no history of mental illness or self-harm. He wasn't on medication. And Fiona Donohoe told him that Noah had had a big tidy up in his room a few days earlier of old schoolwork and had given her a big bag that contained books and papers. And she said she was upset when she had looked at his homework diary, and Gay was written several times on the outside of the homework diary in different handwriting and not Noah's handwriting. And she told Constable Budden she was worried that maybe Noah was being bullied and that he was dealing with that on his own. But we know that we've heard about this from Noah's friends who've already given evidence, and you were in court that day, Declan.
Yeah, this is Jay Tierney's evidence and Charlie Rock's evidence, and the jury were told at that point that one of the questions they will have to consider is whether Noah was struggling with his sexuality. Both of the young lads, the two closest friends, said he wasn't, and actually remarks like that were, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think accurately, was just part of being in an all-boys school. It was just part of the banter, and Noah was good-humoured about it and was as able to give it as he was to get it in that sense, and it was just part of the rough and tumble of school, is how they characterised it.
And Constable Budden also said that Fiona Donohoe had Noah's Kindle device. She'd been able to get into his Google searches, and they'd looked at them together, and one of the last searches was at 20 to 5 on the Sunday night where he'd Googled Cave Hill, and a couple of the other searches earlier in the day had been biblical locations related to the Jordan Peterson book.
Just finally then, one other witness today, and this is the person who's found the phone, Noah's phone.
Adelaide Armstrong said she was out with her husband walking her dog in a park near Castleton Park in North Belfast when she noticed a mobile phone in the grass. She said her husband picked it up, and when they tried to switch it on to find out who owned it, the battery was dead. She said she had a compatible charger at home and took it to try to charge it up so she could reunite the phone with its owner. And then when she was able to turn the phone on, there was a message from the police with a number to call. And she did that, and then the police came to collect the phone a short time later. She told the jury she had tried to use the phone to call Noah's mum when she saw missed calls from mum, but the number was just ringing out. So Ms Armstrong gave 2 statements to the police, and the reason for that was explored this morning. The witness, Ms Armstrong, had walked down with 2 officers to the park to show them exactly where she had found the mobile phone, and it was found just over railings near a bus stop. But when the police returned to take a statement from her, they brought a map, but it turned out to be the wrong map. So then the police had to return at a later date with the correct map so that she could put the X on it. But I think Brenda Campbell-Casey, who's Fiona Donohoe's barrister, was trying to establish, had Adelaide Armstrong got the location wrong or had the police got the location wrong, and it appeared that it was the police had brought the wrong map initially, and Adelaide Armstrong hadn't realised it was the wrong map when she'd put the X on the park, because there are several parks in that area.
Yeah, and was the jury shown a map of this area?
Yes, the jury was shown a map. They were shown the original map and the second map, and then they were able to establish exactly where the phone was found.
And for those following our timeline and Noah's journey, we've spoken about where he fell off his bike, where North Queen Street meets York Road. Castleton Park in that area is just slightly further up North Queen Street, so this is before he got to the junction where he came off his bike.
Yes, and the railings are shoulder height, and it was suggested to Adelaide Armstrong that the phone had got to where it had landed because somebody had thrown it over the railings.
So the phone is located in a position, and that is earlier than what we'd previously heard was the first piece of Noah's belongings, which was the coat at the junction. This places his belongings further back. Interesting.
Yes, and those are the first police witnesses we've heard from in the inquest so far, and there will be many more to come.
Okay, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to, because we can we'll easily update you then when there's new evidence from court that we can bring to you here, whether it's on BBC Sounds or any podcast platform, or indeed if you're watching on the BBC News NI YouTube channel.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.